Hi everyone, today let's do a retouch together. We did this photo shoot out at the coast and got some amazing lighting out there on the water, but also did not have much of any kind of fill light, so we're going to be working with entirely natural light in this image, and let's see how much we can push it. So we're starting here in camera raw settings. If you're working with a JPEG, you can actually go up here to filter and select camera raw filter and use essentially all the same tools right here. Let's go ahead and move our exposure a bit. I'm going to go ahead and actually take our contrast down so that we have a little more control for the time being on our subject's lighting. As you can see, moving the contrast down makes the skin tone and hair tone a lot more identifiable. So after that, let's go ahead and mess with our highlights. I'm going to move them up a little bit. I do like keeping a bit of this color up here in the sky, but I also like the way the highlights is affecting this water right here. Move our shadows up a little bit, give us a little more control on getting more defining features here on the face and in the hair. And actually pulling down the blacks is actually kind of giving us a little bit of that contrast back. We'll do that a little bit. Alright, so that is going to be where we start our image out of camera raw. Okay, now with the image opened, let's go ahead up to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose for the figure right here and not the background. Okay, and then I'm going to take my history brush tool, which the setting is already set for the start of this image, and I'm going to grab the history brush from right here. I'm going to paint out all of the adjustments we made on the background and see how that looks. So now that I've gotten it pretty close to the figure, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. Let's get a hardness of about 60. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to spend a lot more time doing this. So now that we have the whole background selected out, let's go ahead and see how that looks. So before this started, it looked like this, and before that, like that. So what we're looking at now is this. Now that's a bit extreme, especially on a lot of parts of the body. So what I'm probably going to do now is go back in and reselect certain parts and add them back in. So we go to here. Actually back here still. And we're going to go ahead and take the history brush again. Make it bigger. Opacity's down now, which is good. And I'm just going to go ahead and wipe certain areas back in. Particularly going to be wiping in a lot of the darks. The hair. And the last part I'm going to go over is the eyes, so that we keep our eye definition pretty strong. Maybe not quite that strong though. Let's go ahead and just pick out the eyebrows and lashes, as well as the mouth. Alright. We started here, and now we are here. Now I have the skin pretty much isolated from the rest of the image, and I'm actually going to add just a tad bit more history brushing onto the skin. We're going to reduce it to about 30, and just do a quick swipe over the skin. What that does is it just brings it down a little bit, but if we go back and we look here, we're looking at a lot more detail still than we started with. This makes the figure a lot more manageable while color correcting. So now I'm going to go in with Selective Color. As many of you know, this is my favorite color correcting tool, and if you haven't used it yet, you've got to learn to use this one. It's awesome. So we're at red right now. We've got red selected here. I'm going to go ahead down here to the yellows. See what we can affect. Maybe add some more magentas. Looks like we're not actually dealing with that much reds. It's probably more placed under magentas, I'm guessing. Yeah, we're getting a lot more variation here with the magentas. Let's go ahead and make the dress pretty red. I'm thinking about doing a like cyan to red contrast in this image. How about there? So next let's go in with our whites. If we reduce our whites, you can see we lose a bit of our detail on the water, which I kind of like. If we bring it back, we get that sky color back. So I'm trying to think about how I'm going to approach this. Here's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and move this in this direction a little bit. And we're going to say okay. Actually, so now that I did that to the reds, let's just say okay. So what I've just done is I've locked the reds in on this image. Now I'm going to go back to Image, Adjustments, Selective Color. I'm going to go to the whites, and I'm going to brush them up a bit. What that's doing is it's adding this color back up here into this area. But I want these strong tart whites down here. So we're going to say okay right now. Then I'm going to take my history brush and put the opacity up all the way. Put it at its lowest hardness. And I'm going to put it right here on the graph, so at the last selective color we did. I'm just going to wipe over this. So now that gives us kind of those strong whites back. We go down here. And we still have that color in the sky. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to selective color, to the whites, and I'm going to down the whites a bit, giving us that stronger appearance here on the water. I'm going to say okay. Again, move up one, and then go to the sky and paint the color back into the sky. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go back in with it, selective color again. And now I'm actually going to do some adjustments here. So I can add some color to these whites I've created here, if I want, to kind of mix it up a bit more. Then I'm going to go into neutrals. Add a little yellow there as well. Maybe a touch of magenta. and maybe a little bit of red by reducing the cyans. This kind of has a nice look to it. The blacks, I'm just going to mess around, see what we have here. I'm going to do -2, just reduce the neutrals a tiny bit. In the blacks, add a little tiny bit of extra contrast. And we'll keep it there. So with some yellows here in the sky, let's see what happens when we kind of pump these up. Getting a little bit of action there. So one other area we have a lot of control of in this image is blues and cyans, but mostly cyans. So I really want to create some contrast. I can certainly use these to my advantage. So let's look at the changes we made in this last selective color. Went from having very little color differentiation throughout this image. There's a lot of cyan going on here in the skin tones that matches up with this background coloration. And the reds and magentas in this image are quite muted. With these changes in effect, we're getting a lot more distinction between the figure and the background, as well as the sky. So that's making this piece feel a lot more alive to me because we've got this differentiation. It just feels a little more 3D. So another tool I like to play with is color balance. And it's fun to start with the highlights in color balance because it's always interesting to see what they're going to do. So let's move the yellows. If we move the yellows, we start to get a lot more of that hot sunset coloration going on, which might be fun to add a little bit. Could also add a little more red to the mixture. Now let's go to our midtones. Alright, I'm feeling pretty happy with where the image is now. So if we move this out of the way, got these hot colors coming in from the sun. It's just starting to make this image a lot more dramatic. So let's go back and look at where this image started again at the very beginning. Obviously after our raw filter effects. So in the very beginning of this image, there's very, very little contrast going on between the colors, especially in the skin tones here. We go all the way down to where we are now. A lot more differentiation. So this image probably has quite a bit of saturation already, but it's always fun to try a little bit extra. But I think in this case, like I was thinking, it's already got quite a bit of the saturation, especially in the red tones. How about the yellows? I'm going to head and leave those alone as well. Pretty happy with where things are. I actually like it without the brightness and contrast, so I'm actually going to cancel this as well. So looking at this image, one thing that might be bothering me a little bit is the slant going on here, as well as this break in the water right here. I might want to reduce these things a little bit, so let's see what happens. I'm going to do Control A, Control T, and this lets us transform and just start kind of playing with the slant a little bit. I think that's about good. So I'm going to hit Enter, and then I'm going to use crop to crop in. And let's crop. So if we look at that and we look at what we had before, I don't know actually. Yeah, I think I actually do like it that way. This is the process I go through when editing photos. You don't know what you're going to end up liking until you try things. You find out you actually end up liking the tilt in the background. I think this is it. I think this is where I'm going to leave it. So that's kind of my process. It's never as straightforward as people seem to think it is. I always mess around with tools, figure out what I think I'm going to end up liking. There's never any cut dry process to getting an image from point A to point B. There's lots of different steps you can take in Photoshop. The most important thing is you learn how to use your different kinds of tools, and you learn how to use them in different ways together to get the image that you want. I hope that helps, and thank you very much for watching.